Just looking at what President Obama is talking about at the moment, in terms of the state of play, can the Democrats go it alone, or do they definitely need bipartisanship?
They can go it alone if they can keep the votes. I mean, what they can do is they can pass this bill through reconciliation. And they can't pass it in its current omnibus form. What they'll have to do is parse out, because you can only pass issues relevant to the budget through reconciliation. So they need a Senate leader, basically a civil servant, to kind of parse this bill out and see which parts apply to the budget. But nonetheless, they can do it with a 50-vote majority with the vice president voting with them.
Right, okay. So it's not necessary for them to get this, to get bipartisanship, but it is really important overall for Obama's presidency going forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. And one of these things that we're looking for is, even though they can pass this thing through reconciliation, it's going to draw a lot of these moderate Democrats away, because they don't want to necessarily go back to their voters in the fall when they're facing re-election to say, hey, listen, I passed this thing really against your wishes, because right now the American public isn't quite warmed up to this bill and really not in favor of it, and they'd like to see something different. And
one of Barack Obama's general problems is that he's lost a lot of the centrists that came to him in the first place. And
exactly, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that you've been mentioning before as well, is that looking at how this affects him as centrists have begun to leave Obama, does this not only imperil his health care policy, but also energy policy? Of course, we talked about cap and trade in the past, and also looking at other issues that are completely relevant to the budget and other social policies.
Let's look at the budget in general. I mean, something needs to be done. I mean, President Obama's completely right. They can't debate this for another year, can they? I mean, they just don't have that. Financially, they need to get on with it, right?
Well, they can do whatever they want, I guess. But I think at the end of the day, what we're looking at is that they really want to push this off the center stage of the political mainstream, because it's really cost him politically. He really wants to move on to other issues that are a little bit more popular, whether it be financial regulations or issues of consumer protection, things of those issues, which might actually galvanize a little bit more popular support than this one.
Is everything going to end up being watered down because of the state of the votes?
I mean, that's just the history of American politics, isn't it? Really, when you look at policy, especially domestic policy in the United States, it's always the lowest common denominator that wins. And that's because you have to get those 60 votes in the Senate, usually.
Now, what about the budget deficit? I mean, it's soaring at the moment. How much of an issue is that for ordinary Americans? I mean, are they really aware of it?
It's one of the primary issues that they're most concerned with going into these November elections. And I think that's part of the reason why most of when you see this debate getting couched, it's how this is going to affect the deficit long term. But it's a huge issue, but it doesn't really look as though either side really wants to put their neck on the line. Republicans really don't want to raise taxes, or don't even really want to even talk about it when the president actually proposed the commission. And then, of course, on Democrats' side, don't really want to cut spending either.
Yeah. And what about the November elections? Are they going to be another blow for President Obama? Is that the way it's looking at the moment?
It's going to be very difficult for the Democrats to retain the majorities that they currently have. The question is, can they retain a simple majority? And at this point, it looks as though they're going to be able to pull that off. It would really need a Republican sweep, especially in the Senate, to be able to pull off the victories that they need there. But it's still feasible, and if independents continue to leave the president in droves, it's still a distinct possibility.
I know it's very early to be talking about a lame duck president, and midterms are always tricky. But looking globally, are there global consequences for President Obama not really being able to get anything much through?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. When we're looking at this, it's not only in issues of, what's he going to do politically between healthcare and this. There are real consequences. Like you said, the budget deficit. Is the international financial markets going to be able to absorb the debt that's coming out of the United States right now? Cap and trade legislation. And of course, as he gets hit more and more on domestic policy, how does that affect his foreign policy?
John, thank you very much indeed.